Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Pharma Focus. So this video is going to be the very first video of this new year. So happy new year to everyone, whoever is watching this video. So I am starting a series of videos where I'll be talking about various important questions, interview questions particularly for the freshers, and we will be discussing about the major questions that are mostly asked during the interviews. So yeah, let's begin with it. Also, I would like to mention here that the presentation thing that I've created here is by Notebook LM, and therefore there might be some mistakes or misspellings in the same. So don't go on to that. Just listen to what I say and just keep your mind focused on the questions that are very important for interviews. So, alright, starting with the very first question, which is what is pharmacovigilance? So, as you can see on my screen already, it is by WHO. So, whenever you are asked a question in an interview, you can describe it by any recognized authority, the definition that you can state, but try to incorporate these particular words. There might be slight variation in the various definitions, but overall what it means is that it is a science and the activities that are relating to detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects or any other medicine related problems. So that is something which is going to be the same, and you need to keep this thing in your mind forever when appearing for an interview for PV, that you need to be very clear about the definition of what is pharmacovigilance. So with this, let's discuss the second question, which is what are the main objectives that are there for the pharmacovigilance. So the two primary objectives that I'm discussing here is the very first one. So basically, pharmacovigilance, it covers a kind of entire life cycle of a medicinal product. And when we talk about the major objectives of it, then it involves preventing harm from the adverse reactions in humans arising from the use of authorized medicinal products within or outside the terms of marketing authorization or from occupational exposure, etc. So when I say this, here I talk about the authorized medicinal product. So these authorized medicinal products are the ones that are in the market, and just to prevent the harm from their adverse reactions in humans, pharmacovigilance plays a role. And the second objective that I'm stating here is promoting safe and effective use. So promoting the safe and effective use of medicinal products in particular through providing timely information about the safety of medicinal products, healthcare professionals, and public. So when you go into the depth of this PV, we have ICSRs, we have aggregate reporting, we have signal detection, and a lot of other things. So collaboratively, what all these steps are doing is they are promoting safe and effective use here. So ultimately, it is an activity contributing to protection of patients and public health. With this, let's look at anatomy of a safety case, decoding the language of safety. So let's see the other major question here, which is what is the minimum criteria that is required for a valid case. So the cases that are submitted, they can be valid, they can be invalid as well. At times they can be followed up for any particular information. But what particularly makes a case valid is these four parameters. And all these four elements are to be there for a case to be considered as a valid case and a report to be processed. So this involves an identifiable reporter, an identifiable patient, a suspect product, and an adverse drug event. So these are the four minimum criteria that are very important for any case to be valid. And this is one of another major questions that is usually asked during a PV interview. Okay, so now we have another question. What is an adverse event? So as you can see on my screen already, any untoward medical occurrence in patient or clinical investigation subject administered a pharmaceutical product and which does not necessarily have to have a causal relationship with this treatment. So when I say this word does not necessarily have a causal relationship, so here causal relationship is something that states that there has to be an established and a direct link between the administration of medicine and the occurrence of an adverse event. So that what particularly it implies is that drug is the cause of reaction. And furthermore, for developing and assessing this causal relationship, causality assessment is done, which is a kind of a systematic process that evaluates the likelihood that a particular medicine caused an adverse event. But particularly for an adverse event to be called as the definition when we call it, then it is any untoward medical occurrence in a patient or a clinical investigation subject, which is for the investigational drugs that are under the clinical trials, administered a pharmaceutical product, that is the suspect product, and which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with this treatment. So for an adverse event to occur, there is no necessity that there has to be a causal relationship. So that is what an adverse event is. And when we talk about adverse drug reaction, then we talk about a response to a medicinal product which is noxious and unintended. So response in this context, it means that a causal relationship between the medicinal product and an adverse event is at least a reasonable possibility. So when we say this, we talk about that there has to be a causal relationship between the adverse event and the medicinal product for the adverse drug reaction. So these are the two definitions which have a slight of variation, but they are almost similar, but the only difference here is the causal relationship. Again, the critical distinction between adverse event and adverse reaction. So this is one of another major questions that is asked, that what is the difference between adverse event and adverse drug reaction? So for an adverse drug reaction, there has to have a causal relationship, and for an adverse event, a causal relationship is not required or established. So we have another question here, which is what is side effect? So when generally we say in a layman term what is a side effect, then it is something which is not intended effect of the medicine. So a side effect is an effect which is whether therapeutic or adverse, that is secondary to the one intended. So when we say intended effect, it is the effect that is the desired therapeutic outcome for which the drug is prescribed. But on the other hand, when we say side effect, then it is any kind of unintended effect of a medicine that occurs at normal therapeutic doses, but it is in addition to the intended effect. So next question that we have here is what is unexpected adverse reaction? So an adverse reaction that is unexpected is something which an adverse reaction, the nature, severity or outcome of which is not consistent with the applicable product information. So when we say applicable product information, so what this PI is, this helps us to know that what particularly is the listed or the unlisted adverse events are. That helps us to particularly categorize that if the reaction that is stated is expected or unexpected. So PI is basically officially approved document. So we have SMPC, we have USPI, etc., which details the benefit, risk, usage, and safety of the medicine. And therefore, it helps us to know if the reaction is expected or unexpected. And we use another term which is labeled or unlabeled. We use expected and unexpected, so there's a difference between them as well, which I'll be discussing in the further videos. But for now, an unexpected reaction is something whose nature, severity, or outcome of which is not inconsistent with the applicable product information. Alright, so we have another question here which is very commonly asked, that what is a clinical trial? So when I say this in a layman term or in a simpler form, then a clinical trial is any kind of study which is done on the new medicines or the new investigational products to check if they are safe and effective. So going by the theoretical definition, you can always state that it is any investigation in human subjects intended to discover or verify the clinical, pharmacological, and other pharmacodynamic effects of one or more investigational medicinal products. And you can also talk about the various phases here, if ever asked a question about what is a clinical trial, but try answering it in a more scientific manner as it is listed here. So next question we have is, what is an ATMP? This is Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products, and these are the medicinal products for human use, that is either a gene therapy medicinal product or somatic cell therapy product or a tissue engineered product as defined in the regulation. So this is something you can maybe learn as it is, and you can explore more about it if you wish to, but this is another sample question which is generally asked. Alright, so that almost brings me to the end of part 1 of these interview questions. So a complete blueprint from signal to safety, adverse event is observed, 4 minimum criteria is creating a valid case, assessing the causality, then if the link is suspected, then it is adverse drug reaction, and the ADR is compared against the product info, which we talked about the unexpected adverse drug reaction, and if not listed, then it is unexpected. So all the data contributes to the core mission, which is protecting the public health. This has been summarized by Notebook LM again. So yeah, that brings me to the end of the presentation, and pharmacovigilance is not just a regulatory requirement, it is the fundamental pillar of public health. I hope you guys find this video useful, and if you do hit a thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for sure. I'll be coming up with more videos in the coming days particularly about the interview questions that are generally asked in the PV interviews for freshers. Thank you.